Well, happy Easter. I'm glad you're here. My best friend in college is named Chris Simpson. And man, we are really close. He is like a brother to me. He never had a brother. I've got a couple of half brothers, and I might find out about some more this week, next month. I don't know. They just keep coming in. That's a little backstory on my dad. So before I met Chris in college, when he was 16, because we met at college, we were both 18. When he was 16 years old, he and his mom moved from a new neighborhood. They had moved from Louisville, Kentucky to Frankfort, Kentucky, and they lived in a new neighborhood. So he was nervous because his mom left one night, and he was home alone, and he went to check and see if his dad's gun was in the house. And he took it out of the closet. He went and he sat on his bed, made sure it was loaded, but when he stood up from his bed, he accidentally pressed the trigger, and it shot him through the abdomen. And it didn't sever his spine, but it just nicked his spine, and it put just a tiny piece of scar tissue on his spinal cord, so he is paralyzed from the upper thighs down. Again, his spine isn't severed, it's just got a piece of scar tissue on it. And so he has been in a wheelchair since he's 16 years old, and now he's paraplegic. And when I met him, first time I ever saw him, I didn't meet him. We were at a conference after our senior year of high school, this Christian youth conference called Summer in the Sun. And I saw him from a distance there, this guy in a wheelchair, and he was just always flirting with girls, just nonstop, just macking on the ladies. I was like, who is this guy? He's always like, here, come here, have a seat in my lap. And he'd ride him around, do like things like, who is this dude? I will slap him in the back of his head. Then we become really good friends in college. And we became really close buddies, and man, I love this dude like crazy. By the way, just ironically, he has become like this gun connoisseur. He loves gun safety now, based on what's happened. He knows everything about gun safety, and he knows if him and I go see like a John Wick movie together, as soon as John Wick pulls out 7, guns at the same time, he's like, oh, that's a this, a that, another. I'm like, how do you know this already? He's like, they're promoting this because they're new guns. He knows what they are already. I'm like, man, you kill me how much you know about guns. I'm not a political person. Anybody that's a regular knows that. But people on both sides of the aisle will like him because he's a gun aficionado who's from Kentucky, and he's a flaming liberal somehow at the same time. I don't even know how those two things go together, but that's him. That is him to a T. And so a little about Chris, he loves cars also. He has always, ever since I've known him, had like a sweet sports car. And I've got I guess up until this last year, I had a 98 CRV. We're opposites when it comes to that. I'm rocking usually a K car or a CRV that's rusted above the fender. And he's got this sports car all the time. He drives so fast. He has no regard for the law. He's a maniac on a highway. He's usually driving, and I'm sitting with me. He has hand gears, so that, they're put on his sports car so that when he pulls on one gear, that brakes, and when he pushes on it, accelerates, and he has these 2 hand gears, that's how he drives. And the dude has a lead hand. I mean, he is just gone all the time. Like, oh, dude, man. I mean, when he gets on an on-ramp, he is gone. And so I'm like, we'll get there quicker if you drive. You drive, okay? And so he's a classic dude, but we are such good buddies. We became good buddies in college by swapping nightmare stories about the hospital, because as soon as I got to college, my spleen got ripped in half playing football, and I went, internally bleeding to get my spleen removed eventually. And after I got out of the hospital, we were talking, and it turned out we had almost identical scars from right under our chest to go around the belly button. And man, we have the same scar. That's crazy. And we started swapping nightmare stories about the pain and all the stuff we went through in the hospital. And then eventually we hit on the fact that we both had received Demerol. Like, Demerol's good stuff, dude. Like, I know. I don't recommend it recreationally, people, but dang, when you're dying in the hospital, Demerol feels good. And so we just became really, really good buddies. And eventually, he started calling me a spleenless wonder, and I was like, I don't know how to take that from a dude in a wheelchair, but I didn't feel like I could come back the way I wanted to, because usually I was quick-witted, and you didn't talk trash to me in high school because you would get lit up. And I just couldn't do that to him. I was like, I can't rip on a paraplegic guy. He eventually got me to, but I can't share that stuff with you. You will never listen to me again. you'll be like, this dude is the most awful person on earth. But behind closed doors, him and I would battle it out. And, he eventually talked me into handy wrestling him, where I'd get on the floor and not use my legs, and just beat the crap out of each other, fighting and stuff. And you're using your legs. I am not. I'm just whipping you because you're a wuss, And so that's the kind of friendship we have. He constantly, we were big fans in college of the movie Bad Boys. And I know half of the cast has been canceled, but Bad Boys, is Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. And so we quoted that all the time. And one thing, it's a quote from the movie. He always talked about his paralyzed legs. He always called them the dead legs, because there's this brief line in Bad Boys that's, watch where you're swinging a dead leg, and it's a corpse. And he always mentions the dead legs. And everything has this key word of dead when he's doing his humor about, his legs and all that. And so one time when I was doing an internship in Louisville, which is where he is from, and we're post-college, we went to a Steak and Shake late one night, and it's on Bardstown Road, which is pretty much like a urban highway. It's not on the interstate, but it is like just several lanes of traffic. It's buzzing all the time. We came out of a Steak and Shake, and he's rolling beside me. He's coming along, and he's like, we're going to the car, and he goes, hey, dude, check this out. I call this the dead roll. And all of a sudden, he gave one stroke of the wheels and then acted like he was unconscious, heading toward the street. He went, and he just did this. And, dude, people, screeching out of the way, because it looks like you look up and here's a dude in a wheelchair rolling into traffic. And people are like, what is going on? Ah! And, dude, I lost it. He finally popped up before he got in the street. And I was like, what are you actually doing right now? And he's like, you like that? I love that. So, pretty much any time we were near a busy street, he would do that. Check out the dead roll. One stroke. No! And it was just the best. So this is the kind of friendship that we have. He's just a fun dude. Whenever we do a picture together, I didn't mention this at 8 o'clock, we take two types of poses. One is called the hardcore pose, and that's where we just look tick. Like, do you want some of this? Do you want some? That's what look, you guys got scared or didn't know what to do right there, but yeah, this is hardcore. Pick up a bottle in this one. This is at Melt. Remember Melt? Rest in peace. That's us, hardcore pose. And then the other pose that we have, we're going to do hardcore, and then the other one is fake laugh. Here we go. So fake laugh. We have dozens of fake laugh pictures, and just if I scrolled through them, it makes my day. Just watching the dead. That's Mabel's downtown on his birthday, and this is my kids at a conference, Summer in the Sun, with me photobombing in the background, also doing a fake laugh. And so, just love my dude. In recent years, our pranks have continued to evolve, and I usually go visit him in July for a few nights, and I used to have thousands of these little square promo cards that would promote if I had a new song or album come out. iTunes, sometimes it would be my Instagram, all that stuff. And I had more than I needed, and so I would just take a stack with me when I'd go to his apartment, stay with him, and I'd just hide them everywhere in his apartment. And I was like, he's going to want to murder me one day because he's going to keep finding these cards everywhere. So every time he finds one, he sends me a super short video. Dude, are you kidding me right now? And he'd show me the promo card. So here's a really quick montage of some of the promo cards he's found over the years that he continues to find to this day.
Yeah, getting some stuff out of my oven. Reach over here and grab this thing and pow, my boy. Heading out to the gun range today. And there's my boy in with all my bullets. Yeah. Open up the card box, which I'm sure you know what it looks like. And here are the cards. And I flip this one over and there you are. Another one of your cards.
Seriously, dude, we're doing this again. My dog. I kind of hate you.
I think I found one of the originals from back in the day, my boy.
For real, I'm gonna give you some cred because that is awesome.
Just wore this jacket today.
It was crazy how we would negotiate. Everybody.
There you go.
Yeah, 300.
Another
300.
surprise.
He's like, 70. That's the best.
My dog.
This is a good one. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Do you know what's going on back here on my fridge? My dog.
You can go ahead and start cracking up right now. Are you serious?
Really? How? Are you like Houdini? I see what you did there.
Really? My dog.
Really? This is where we went to? Moving. I'm totally out. Come here to pick up a few odds and ends. But I am, dude, I'm going to spread your message. Keep that baby up there. Whoever moves in here. So, dude, you might get some, you might get a couple plugs, a little plug in here. Love you, dude. And by the way, those things were everywhere.
He actually bought his first house, moved out of that apartment, and the house didn't work out. And just a few months later, he moved back to the exact same apartment. The card's still there. It's like 12 feet up there. He's like, how did you get that up there? I was like, I got hops, okay? And but yeah, one of my favorite ones is, and you'll hate me for this, but I put that one in his shoe because he's not going to feel it. And so he wore that thing for days until he finally realized, there's a card in my shoe that's dragging around in there. But he didn't feel it. It wasn't bugging him like it would most people. He's like, really, you're putting it in my shoes now? And so, yeah. Now what's funny is, I don't know if he'll watch the sermon, but I started last summer hiding old 8x10 promo pics I had when I used to DJ parties in Washington, D.C. And there are these, like, it's me in an alley in Washington, D.C. in a dumpster. And I hid, like, 14 of them in his apartment last July. He hasn't found one yet. They're 8x10s, and he hasn't found them anywhere. Oh, they're coming, buddy. They're coming. You're going to start finding them all over. Better check your shoe. So one last thing is, it causes problems for him at times. Of course, having paralyzed legs, problems that we don't usually have, there's problems. And one of them is, they were grilling out, him and a bunch of buddies were grilling out one day, and he has like a lower grill that he'll come up to, and he'll, grill burgers or whatever. And he was talking to a buddy who's like, man, what are you grilling? And he's like, just burgers. He was like, it kind of smells funky. He was like, what do you mean it smells? Yeah, it does smell a little bit funky. And the guy was like, are they turkey burgers? No, they're not turkey burgers. These are real burgers and all that. And the guy comes around, my buddy looks down, he's like, oh, my knee is on the grill. His knee is touching the grill, and it's burning his skin, but he doesn't know. And so he still has a scar on his knee from that time where his knee's just sizzling, just well done, just working it, or whatever. Like, what's that smell? Well, so some flesh maybe, the little patella, chef's kiss to the patella. But yeah, that's the kind, when nerves are essentially dead, it causes a lot of problems. We'll come back to that. So John chapter 11, you can use the paperback Bible for free that's under the chair in front of you. You download the Bible app for free. I'm going to refer to some of the verses in this story, but I'm mostly just going to tell it in my own words to streamline it. But Jesus had some friends. It's really cool to think about the fact that aside from the disciples, Jesus had friends that he would hang out with whenever he could. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were siblings who lived in a place called Bethany. Bethany was 2 miles east of Jerusalem, kind of like a suburb, but it wasn't really a suburb back then. Just a little town on the Mount of Olives on the east side of Jerusalem. So Jesus would go visit and he'd eat with them and he'd hang out with them, but he loved them dearly. They were good friends. But one time when Jesus was traveling around with his disciples, the sisters sent word to Jesus that Lazarus was really sick. And it gets kind of confusing right here because Jesus doesn't immediately go visit Lazarus, and he's a miracle worker. He's been healing people that he chooses to heal out on the road with his disciples, but he doesn't show up, and eventually Lazarus passes away. And so then he goes to Bethany, and when he arrives in Bethany, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days, and Martha sees him coming, and she leaves the house, and she goes to meet Jesus, and she goes right up to him, and she says in verse 21, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. Reading between the lines here, it's like she's saying, yeah, preacher, I get it, the afterlife. Cool, that's great. But right now my brother's dead. And you're talking about the time at the end of time when all the saints, yep, I get it, heaven, beautiful. But then in verse 25, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. So she affirms, I believe that you are the one, the Messiah, that's Hebrew, or in Greek, it's Christ. the one who's been prophesied about for centuries. I believe you are him. You have come here with a special mission. We've been waiting for you. You're going to bring us deliverance and freedom somehow, and I believe that you are that guy. And so that's what she proclaims there, that she knows Jesus' true identity. So then something incredible happens after that in verse 33. When Jesus saw Mary weeping, Mary, so nobody ever gets these sisters, Mary and Martha, mixed up, but Martha's the first one he talks to. Then Mary sees Jesus and she comes out and she falls at his feet weeping and she says, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. It sounds like before Jesus got there, in their grief and in their disappointment, they were angry with Jesus. Why would he not come when his good friend Lazarus, who he loved, and he could have stopped this, and so, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. So they've agreed. Jesus has let them down. And in verse 33, when Jesus saw Mary weeping and the Jews who had come along with her weeping also, he was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him, he asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Then in verse 35, the shortest but one of the heaviest verses in English versions of the Bible, verse 35, Jesus wept. And it's not because he doesn't know what's about to happen, spoiler alert. It's because he sees the grief of Mary and Martha, and his heart is broken for them because their hearts are broken, and he empathizes with them. He weeps. So then he goes to the tomb, and he commands, take away the stone, move it out of the way. Usually a tomb was basically a cave, and a stone was put in front of it and sealed. And so they moved the stone out of the way, and Martha's like, wait, shut this down. Why would we want to remove the stone? He's been in there 4 days, and that it's going to smell like he's been dead 4 days. And the Jews believed that the spirit departed the body after 3 days. And so she's like, what are you doing? Why would you move the stone? And he basically said, hey, did I not tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God? And then they roll away the stone to the entrance, and Jesus prays to the Heavenly Father, Father, I thank you that you have already heard me. And then he called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And man, all of a sudden, there's this image that darkens the entrance to this cave, this tomb. And I have to imagine that there are people there who responded in different ways. Someone gasped, someone probably screamed, someone maybe fainted, because this has to be so surreal. And it says in verse 44, the dead man came out. Isn't it funny that it's still referred to him as the dead man in that moment, just to emphasize, this is nuts. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. And it's hard for me not to picture Lazarus coming out, and he's got like slightly mummified. He's got these things that help him to be embalmed with spices and all that are on his body, and he comes out, and it's hard for me not to picture him doing a little bit of the Thriller dance, just like, what is that? This crazy. He walked out of the grave, and then Jesus said, take off the grave clothes and let him go. And so what I want to point out in the story is this, that Jesus makes this remarkable statement here. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. He claimed to be the personification of resurrection. He claimed to be the personification of true life. I mean, he's the creator in a human body, so it makes sense for him to say, I am life. I am the one who can recreate and resurrect. And so resurrection and life are personified in Jesus, wrapped in a human body. And if you read through the Gospel of John, like if you take that free paperback Bible home and you start reading the Gospel of John or Matthew, Mark, or Luke, if you start reading them, you'll see why Jesus says this here. Over and over, he does things that resurrect or bring back to life or transform or make new. He does these things over and over and over. And so Martha is talking directly to resurrection when she's having that conversation. And he says, I am the resurrection and the life. And so you read through the stories of the Bible and you see that whenever Jesus stepped into a scene, resurrections happened in one way or another, literally like here, or metaphorically in so many ways. There's a preacher who I don't really know, but I love this quote. His name's Robert Crosby. He once wrote, whenever Jesus came on the scene, resurrections occurred. Dead things came back to life. Blind eyes suddenly could see. Disabled men stood up and walked. Deaf ears could hear. Tax collectors offered refunds. Prostitutes prayed. And oh yes, dead men lived. Whenever Jesus stepped into the place, resurrections happened. And what that means to me is simply this: hope. Like, the things that seem dead and gone, the things that seem over, aren't over when Jesus is invited to the funeral. They aren't over when Jesus is invited to the tomb and they say, okay, Jesus, can you do something with this? Can you? My friend Chris Simpson, the reason I told all those stories aren't just because I miss him or like, man, he just really wanted to talk about his friend today. It's because once when we moved away from Louisville, me and my wife Shannon got married. We moved to Washington, D.C., where I became an associate minister at a church out there. One morning, he called me, and he was like, dude, I got to tell you about last night. I was like, what's going on? He was like out of breath, and it was morning. And I was like, what happened? He goes, I came home late last night. He goes, it was like 1:30 a.m. He goes, I came up in my apartment. I parked in the handicap spot right next to the community mailboxes, for the apartments, this big metal, and everybody's got a number. I parked right next to it. He goes, I got out in my chair. I went over. I thought I'd check my mail on the way in, and it's so silent outside. It's like 1:30 a.m. He goes, I roll up. I get my key in the mailbox, and out of nowhere, like a squirrel fell out of the tree that was right above the mailboxes, like fell from outer space in the dark. Like I didn't even see it coming. He goes, and when it hit the top of those mailboxes, nothing has ever startled me more in my entire life than in the dead of night. This thump in front of me, and then all of a sudden you can imagine the sound of the claws trying to get traction on the top of the mailboxes until finally, boom, it's gone. And he's like, oh my gosh, it scared me so bad. But when it landed there and it startled me and I jumped, I felt my legs. I said, what? And dude, I started tearing up. I was like, you felt your legs? He goes, it was crazy. He goes, this feeling shot from like my head to my toes. He goes, it just shot through me. He goes, and for a split second, I felt my legs. It was like this twinge or the surge that went through me. He goes, I went in and I went to bed. He goes, but I laid there all night. He goes, my legs were like tingling all night. And what? He said, yeah, I could barely sleep last night because all night my legs were tingling. It was like my fight or flight response kicked in, and it shot a message through my whole body in the places that I haven't felt in so long. And so it's really interesting because it's just this reminder that his brain is constantly trying to send neuro impulses, signals down to the non-responsive parts of his body from his upper thighs down, and just constantly sending those messages, but they're not getting there because of that scar tissue. And so it's like, wow, this is crazy. Now, nothing else has ever come of that. He started going to some therapy and doing some different things to try to see, is there anything that I can do? And nothing has come of it. He is still paralyzed from the upper thighs down. But that night, it was crazy. There was a surge of life. There was a flood of feeling. And there was this burst of hope of like, what? And this experience will always remind us that there is still a connection there. It's just a connection that is distorted, but it's there. So the reason I bring this up is because I'm a kid who, if you know my story, I'm a kid who grew up a punk kid with a family that didn't go to church. We weren't Christian. My grandfather was. And I was just a punk kid who, I didn't get anything from church or from Christians. They were the ones that didn't say certain words and didn't do certain things and all that, and I had no interest in any of that. But a church camp changed that all for me because I went to a church camp, invited by my best friend, and I heard about the real Jesus from the scriptures, and I felt a surge of hope in my life. Like the stuff in my life, the parts of my life that were dead, that they could come to life through Jesus, who claims, I am the resurrection and the life. And the reason we started Momentum is because we know that there are tons of people in the world who have dead parts of their life that only can be changed when Jesus is invited to the funeral to say, Jesus, what can you do with this? And so we said, man, let's start a church for people who don't like church. And we can try to reach people and love people and serve people in the whole spectrum that is Dan Smith and Shannon Smith, which is lost punk kid and then preacher's kid, Shannon, who grew up blessed by the church. And we've been a place, a spiritual haven for everyone in between. And so, but there's a lot of people who show up at Momentum because a friend invited them, or they saw the sign out front, or one day they just decided, you know what, we've had kids now. Let's not damage them too much. Let's take them to church, and let's see if they can teach them something about God. Or they take a paperback Bible home when they come and they start reading the Gospel of John. And there's this, sometimes when they come to Momentum, they articulate things to me that are basically saying, when I am with these people, this community, not because of this stupid room. This room is nothing fancy. There's nothing holy or special about this room. It's Jesus' people gathering to worship Jesus. They say, I experienced something, and it's like there's hope. It's like there's a surge of life, a spark of hope that I might say, man, could this be me too? Maybe these aren't just a bunch of goody two-shoe people. Maybe they are people who were just like me 5 years ago, but now they're on a journey with Jesus. Man, could my life be resurrected by the resurrector and the walking incarnated life? And you get this surge of life, this flood of feeling, this burst of hope, that maybe even you could make a comeback. And I would say God is trying to reestablish a connection with you. As distorted as that connection has become, God is sending signals. I still love you. I still want you on my team. I still want you to follow me. I still want you to be a part of the spiritual family. And coming to church is a great step when you feel that surge of hope. Maybe it's your marriage. Maybe you're like, man, we are married. It's not going well. Or we've learned to just live with each other. Neither of us are going to go anywhere because that's going to cost too much money and divide the stuff and blah, blah, blah. But you're sticking together, but it's like neither of you, it's what you wanted. Like this has not turned out the way you wanted or expected. Just like, yeah, we're doing it. And then you come to Momentum, and the truth is, when you come, you see some people who are in their 50s or 60s who are holding hands. And you're like, gross. Who does that? What are they, teenagers? They're holding, I don't want to touch my spouse. Like, gross. Like, whatever. You see people who are like, it's like they're still ride or die mode, but the honeymoon's way over. And you're like, what in the world? Why is that? Okay. And what you conclude is the people at Momentum who seem to love each other and serve together and enjoy that they hang out with some other couples who they feel like are good influences on their marriage, they're church people. So they're faking it, right? They're faking it. And I'm not denying that maybe there are some who are. Maybe I don't know what's going on, but I know a whole bunch of couples who aren't faking it. And the thing that's changed is Jesus is at the center of their marriage, and they've both been humble enough to say, okay, I'm going to let you lead us, Jesus. And Jesus was invited to the funeral, and things happened. And I hope that's a surge of hope for you, that your marriage could be resurrected too. Life can be sparked into your marriage in a burst of hope. Lazarus, come forth. There is hope for your marriage. Maybe it's something that might sound silly to 90% of us, but maybe you're a person that used to be a creative type, used to paint, used to play music, used to write poetry, whatever it is, and that's been dead and gone like Justin Timberlake and T.I. I mean, it's been dead. Explain that to your mom next to you. Actually, Mom, explain it to your kid. That's the way it's okay. So maybe you're like, that's been gone. But then you come to Momentum, and sometimes someone will be there, and they'll articulate to me or to Andre, our worship director, like, man, I used to play guitar, and it's been lost. That has been a dead part of my life. Creativity, songwriting. But man, since I've been worshiping God, since I've been reestablishing connection with Jesus, it's like I want to pick up my guitar again. It's like I have things to sing about. It's like I'm experiencing grace, and I'm seeing my pain in a new light, and I want to write about it. And it's like, man, Lazarus, come forth. Jesus has stepped into the joint, and he's causing resurrection to happen. It could be things like, things that are dead in my life, true friendship. Yeah, I got friends, but I know as soon as I leave the room, they're talking about me the way they talk about others. True friendship is dead and gone. There aren't people I can trust. Or the desire to be an incredible parent. I'm done with it. Just take your device and go. Like I don't even care anymore. I'm not investing in this. I don't know what to do. My mom and dad were terrible. I don't know how to be a good mom and dad. Or maybe it's the vision to be a part of something bigger than yourself, to be a part of a church family or a spiritual team. Those things, sometimes you start to feel the spark of hope. Maybe this stuff is legit. Maybe I could have a place within this community. There's a lady named Megan, one of my buddies at Momentum, who's super cool. And she's given me permission to tell you that she is a survivor of childhood sexual abuse perpetrated by a neighbor from age 3 to 7 for her. And the family eventually moved, which brought an end to the abuse, but the damage was done. And so she developed a pretty severe touch phobia, and she's had this story full of, it's been trauma and addiction and, addiction to cope with trauma, some ODs, mental illness wards, family intervention, rehab, losing custody of her daughter, losing her job at her home. Eventually she was homeless for 6 months. And so she's been through it, but she told me at one point, I'd become a zombie. I tried to commit suicide several times. I was alive, but barely going through the motions. I'd abandoned all hope that I could be cured or made whole again. I was too unworthy to seek Jesus, let alone call on him for any help or hope. But in the summer of 2018, a guy that she was dating at the time, who they have no contact anymore, but back then he invited her to Momentum. And they came to Momentum, and she stuck. And years later, she says, I was sitting in a service at church, and I heard about this new Mo group starting on Saturday mornings here in the basement called Rejoice in Recovery. Not just for addicts, but all kinds of issues. Whether it's grieving or pride or whatever. It's just a very transparent, vulnerable, safe kind of group. So she went, and she said, man, I remember being so nervous at the first meeting because I hated dredging up my past and found it difficult to announce to my fellow church-going friends that I was a recovering alcoholic, amongst other things. She said, we began each meeting with a quick introduction by sharing our first name and the things that we were struggling with. She said, as everyone in the circle began to share, I began to hear my story said out loud. I struggled with anxiety and depression too. Of course, a few people shared they were alcoholics, and there were even some people in the group that shared they were a victim of child sexual abuse too. And it kind of hit me with a jolt that no matter the size, depth, or scope of a problem, there's always someone who can relate on some level. And there's nothing that Jesus can't help with if I have a mustard seed-sized drop of hope in him. And what's cool is Megan is now an apprentice leader with Rejoice in Recovery, which is so cool and so amazing. And she says, I'm actually comfortable hugging people now and actually find myself enjoying it, having contact with people who are now safe people and friends. But this time she says, cool, I don't really celebrate recovery milestones, which is totally fine if you do. She said, I don't really celebrate recovery milestones. I try to live one day at a time. And she said, today I am sober. Today I am loved. Today I give back. I'm like, what an amazing story of Jesus saying, I am the resurrection. And where you think there's no hope, if you just invite Jesus to the funeral, if you just say, Jesus, what can you do with this? Then Jesus brings resurrection and life. And for you, maybe you've experienced trauma, but you didn't go the route of coping through addiction. Maybe there's a whole bunch of other things you do to try to numb, or a whole bunch of other things you do to try to distract yourself from the pain that you feel. And the good news is after, I don't know if it's been a year and a half, I think it's been 2.5 years, we have some good news to announce that we will have a professional
Hi, Momentum, and happy Easter.
video.
When I think of
We have Mike Love, who is going to slide right in and scare the crap out of you. But we have a licensed professional counselor that will be at Momentum with hours in the building here that we've just hired that will be starting in June, which is amazing. Her name is Stacy. Can't wait for you all to meet her. But yeah, God is up to something at Momentum. And my promise to you is you will never have to sit and share your problems with Mike Love, my friend who just came. All right? Just playing. Mike Love's awesome, but he did scare us all to death. And so, yeah, one more thing I'll throw out here is, this image of baptism. If we go back to Jamie Lewis's baptism, that image of baptism, there's a guy named Paul who writes scripture that's in the Bible. He's a first century Christian. And he says this, talking to Christians, people who have surrendered to Jesus and put faith in Jesus. And he says in Romans 6:6 in scripture, our old self was crucified with him. So picturing Good Friday, Jesus being crucified, Paul's saying, when you see Jesus images of him being crucified, or think about it. When you're a Christian, you can say, my old self, my previous person, was crucified with him. Because when I put faith in Jesus, somehow God's able to do anything he wants to do, and he can teleport our sin and our nastiness and our mistakes and all this stuff through time to the cross onto Jesus' shoulders, so that when he died on Good Friday, he was taking our sin. And then when we put faith in Jesus, he deals with our sin, and that's why Friday is good, because he dealt with our sin through the cross. And so the idea of the old life, the previous life, is dead and it's gone. But then he writes this also in Romans 6. He says to Christians in the city of Rome, we were therefore buried with him through baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, we too may live a new life. Here's the image. Now, I've said this many times, but baptism, it's cool that when you follow Jesus, or at least when people in Scripture believed in Jesus, the first thing they did was immediately get baptized. And baptism in Jesus' day, no one debates this. It was immersion in water. You were dipped in water. And I know some people sprinkle, some people pour, some people do that. But that all developed much later. We know from Scripture it was burial in water. In Romans 6, it shows that. And historically, we know that. And that is an image of reenacting the gospel. That Jesus died and was buried, and he rose after 3 days. That's reenacting the gospel. The first thing that you do after you say, I believe that Jesus is who he says he is, and he's done what he says he's done. All right, there's some water. Let's get you baptized. And you reenact the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And Paul says, just as Jesus rose from the dead, you rise to walk in a brand new life empowered by Jesus, the resurrection and the life. And that's what happened for Jamie Lewis. That's what happened for Blue Microphone. You see the difference, how he's serving and just enjoying the playground? That is total change, man, 180. But Jesus rose from the dead to show us this is the hope that I'm offering mankind. This is what I came for. So we celebrate Easter not only because Jesus rose from the dead, and he did, but we celebrate because he has the power to raise us from the dead. That we can walk through life empowered by the risen Christ and say, man, I have resurrection power in me because God's Holy Spirit lives in me and Jesus is alive in me. And man, Easter is hope that any dead thing can be brought to life. So here's the picture, and maybe this is a stark picture for you. Great news for you is that because Jesus is the resurrection and the life, if you put faith in Jesus, you can get out of bed in the morning. Seriously. Like, because Jesus is the resurrection and life and wants to fill you with resurrection and life, it will fill your soul with a sense of purpose. I now know why I'm here. I can figure it out through what God tells me. I understand why I was put in this earth, that he has a purpose for me, that he has good news and a plan for me, and it fuels you with energy to serve God and to serve others in your lifetime. One of the things I think is cool about Lazarus is Jesus only raised 3 people from the dead. He healed a whole bunch of people, cast out demons, cleansed lepers. But as far as we know, that's recorded anyways, there's only 3 recorded. And Lazarus is unlike the other 2. The other 2, there was a widow whose son was raised in a place called Nain. There was Jairus' daughter who was raised, and Jesus was actually on the way to heal her from sickness, and she died. So he got there right after she died and raised her. But there's no parallel whatsoever to the raising of a man who had been dead for 4 days. What is Jesus telling us by his timing, the fact that he waits till Lazarus is 4 days dead before he shows up in Bethany? What is he telling us? He's telling us no one is too far gone. This is the message. No one's too far gone to be revived by Jesus. Nobody is too dead spiritually to be resurrected. And we have seen this so many times at Momentum. Believe it or not, we've seen it so many times at Momentum. People who would say, I never expected to be an apprentice at Rejoice in Recovery. I was homeless and addicted. People who are just like, I was just depressed and had no purpose, so I just did whatever made me feel good with whoever made me feel good and whatever tasted good and made me feel good afterward. I did this. I achieved. I worked. I tried to build a name for myself. There's so many things that people did, and they said, now I never expected to be here where I don't have to work to be loved. I am loved. I don't have to work to fabricate joy. I've been filled with joy, that even on a bad day, I have this well of joy inside of me that no one can ever take away because of what Jesus has done for me. And God's grace can forgive anyone. No one is too far gone. It doesn't matter where you've been. It's like the worship song we sang earlier, Goodbye Yesterday. And so this stuff is nothing for Jesus. It's nothing for Jesus. He is resurrection and he is life. Lazarus, come forth. Let's pray.